ThreatLocker implements a least privileged approach to cybersecurity, blocking every executable unless specifically authorized by your team. This methodology mitigates ransomware, supply chain attacks, and zero-day exploits. It ensures 24/7, 365 protection for your organization. To learn more about how ThreatLocker can help prevent known and unknown threats in your digital environment, safeguard your data and operations from threat actors, and align your organization with compliance frameworks, visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. And now we're going to do the regular Enterprise Security Weekly news. And the reason I am calling it regular news is we just did a news segment before this. If you haven't seen that, highly recommend you go check that out. That special news segment is all about the announcements that came out of Microsoft's Ignite conference. And the reason we made a separate news segment for that is because there's a lot of important stuff in there that you need to know, a lot of changes to their security products, a lot of changes to Copilot. They've changed the names of things. They've changed the icons of things. Just in general, if you're in tech, you need to check that out just to keep up with all these changes that Microsoft just made to keep us on our toes and annoy us, honestly. All right. Now, jumping into the normal Enterprise Security Weekly news, you can check out securityweekly.com/ESW385 if you want to follow along as we go through the news. And I forgot to mention it in the last segment, but we now have Darwin Salazar with us, in addition to Eamon Elsawa. Welcome, guys.
Howdy.
Howdy. Jinx, you owe me a soda.
I know.
Hey, only I could say that. I'm from Texas.
All right.
That's true.
We're going to get started with acquisitions and funding, as is our typical tradition. And I'm just going to read through all the fundings and the acquisitions, and then we can just jump back in there because I know Eamon and Darwin, you have a lot to say about all the different things in here. So I didn't think we had a funding this week, but Darwin came in clutch with a late-breaking news item that CISA raised $300 million in a Series D with a valuation of $3 billion. Bitsight acquired the cyber threat intel platform Cyber6Skill. Snyk acquired Probly for an undisclosed amount. The Cyber6Skill one I just mentioned from Bitsight, that was $115 million, that acquisition price. Silverfort picked up Resonate for an undisclosed amount. Resonate is an identity threat detection and response vendor. So ITDR. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's the first ITDR acquisition that I've seen so far. And then Wiz acquired DAS for $450 million. So big acquisition there. Wiz is now that IPO potential size where they can start making their own acquisitions. So yeah, guys, where do you want to start?
I would say data security and CISA.
Okay.
The fact that data security has been a hot space is something that we've been hounding on over at least the past 5 or 6 months, since AI and AI security really started picking up a lot of steam, I would say, coming out of RSA. And the data security space remains hot. There's been a ton of DSPM acquisitions and DLP solution acquisitions, with CISA just last month acquiring Trail Security, even while Trail Security was still in stealth. So there's a lot going on in the space, and 300 million Series D is nothing to blush at. And I think it points to the fact that the momentum is there. The problem, it's very right timing for the problem space, but also CISA has assembled the right team to tackle the problem. And I would say they have probably gotten a fair amount of acquisition offers, and they probably have turned that down. And I think they're going to go through and building their own business. At this point, probably too big to acquire for most. And so I'm excited to see what the future holds for CISA as a pure play data security company.
You mean Wiz?
CISA.
CISA.
Yeah.
Well,
but Wiz is also too big to acquire. So except for, Google Cloud and AWS and Microsoft. But Yeah, I guess you could also say Wiz is at the point where it's
Okay.
too big to
Yeah,
acquire.
I'm
Yeah.
getting confused. I was getting Syra and Daz mixed up in my head. Uh,
Uh,
sorry about that. But yeah,
All
it's
good.
interesting given that so Microsoft Purview is pitched as a DSPM, but I'm constantly talking to people who are buying DSPMs to make Purview usable. So
Hmm.
I find that kind of funny that they're labeling it DSPM. But yeah, a really hot space. I mean, data security is an unsolved problem. People don't know what they have or where it is, much less have any kind of controls or enforcement around protecting it.
100%. Yeah, and when we think about organizations building their own AI models, data integrity, data quality, and all of that is very top of mind. So not only has data security been a largely unsolved problem for the past 10, 15, 20 plus years since inception of the internet and of technology, but also now introducing an entirely new problem space, or expanding the attack surface of data security, and also the implications of potential like data poisoning and the impact, that downstream impacts that may have on a AI model that an organization uses to make business decisions for the organization, or at least influence it. This now kind of amplifies the importance of data security. So um, yeah, there's an influx of data being generated by businesses, and I think the compounded annual growth rate of data, business data, as Cribble has like done research on this space, it's growing at about 28% per year for enterprises. So the amount of data generated by businesses just continues to grow, and it's out of hand. And you need a solution to be able to help keep it all secure. So
And it's
it doesn't
interesting.
sound like it's purview.
It's interesting. I just did a webinar with Rubrik, and I've been hearing
Mm-hmm.
this from other folks as well, where there's a lot of conversation going on how to figure out what data you can get rid of. So I think a lot of businesses, as privacy becomes more and more important, the likelihood that you're going to get fined for collecting and storing too much data now has a lot of businesses thinking, okay, how can we streamline? How can we get rid of data? And Rubrik, because they're also a backup vendor, and they acquired a DSPM, Laminar, a while back. Now they can say, you know what? Delete it. Worst case scenario, we can restore it for you. If you find out that you actually needed it. So I'm really interested to see that trend as well, as companies try and streamline the amount of data, because traditionally it's been hoard as much as you can, because data is valuable. We want to hold on to all the data, but now that there's consequences for having too much data, I think that's going to be an interesting problem to solve.
100%. Yeah, and it's same things going on in the security space with like SOC teams, right? They're being very mindful of what they ingest into their SIEM solutions, not only because of cost, but also the additional noise that it brings into the SIEM, and also the impact on compute resources of running queries on a recurring basis on massive data sets, versus if you optimize and trim the data that's coming in, everything is much more efficient, cost efficient, and operationally more efficient. And so you don't have to secure what you don't store or what you don't own. And so from a enterprise data standpoint, Rubrik kind of making those recommendations to their customer makes a lot of sense. But also security teams should be thinking the same way as it relates to what they ingest into their SIEM, and being very critical of like what fields from each log source are not necessary, or what types of events can we throw out, because like we've suffered, we're suffering on the enterprise side and on the security side of data bloat, and so I think the data security space, and then vendors who help optimize security data management like Rubrik uh, there's a long runway for them. So
Yeah. Yeah. Over to you, Eamon. I think you got some thoughts on some of these as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, so it it's just starting to pique my interest, or I'm wondering. Um, we saw Wiz, like Wiz is a decacorn right now. 12 billion was their last valuation at like in May, and Sneak is approaching, well, last, possible amount was 8 point something billion. It's making me wonder. There's a couple of decacorns now in cybersecurity. What's next for them? Are we, and these acquisitions are just continuing. So are we in a bubble right now? Is there a cybersecurity bubble when we just kind of hit something before? So I just wonder what's next. Um, the convergence of AI as well is something else to consider. So it's just an interesting space that we're in right now. Investors are they're going to be looking to get their money from these businesses. So I'm just kind of sitting back and just like with AI, just grabbing some popcorn, just watching what's going on. I'm really curious how profitable the companies are. What's the sheet? What's the how's their P&L look, and how are they doing from
Mhm.
acquisition? Well, I think the acquisitions are looking good, right? But yeah, it's just I have a lot of thoughts going on in my head. I'm like, just some radar
Yeah.
things coming up here.
Yeah, some of them, it's become more common for them to share their run rates, at least their ARR, which doesn't tell you everything, but it is
Yeah.
a pretty key data point. I think Wiz shared when they passed I think they were aiming to hit the 500 million mark by the end of this year or something like that, 500 million ARR, which is pretty significant given that I think somebody mentioned that Darwin, I think it was you who mentioned that Palo Alto just hit 2.1. Is that for a quarter or is that for a whole year?
2.1 billion in revenue in Q1 of their 2025 fiscal year. They reported
Okay,
earnings
so that's a
yesterday, and
quarter.
so
Okay.
2.1 bill in this past quarter, ending in October 31st of this year.
Oh, just in the
So
quarter. Wow.
yep.
Yeah.
So the other thing is, Wiz
So their
has
market
already
cap's
eclipsed
like
the.
63 billion or something, right?
I would assume higher at this point because their stock price is at about 400.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. I'll pull up the number, but Wiz has also already eclipsed the 500 mil ARR, and in a article and interview, they mentioned, I think there was their CTO and co-founder that mentioned they're targeting 1 billion ARR by next year, and
Mm-hmm.
they won't go IPO until they have that 1 billion ARR.
Mm.
So they are sharing kind of like their future roadmap for the company, and I think this is a way to incentivize and motivate their employees, but also to let the Palo Altos and the CrowdStrikes of the world know that they're coming, right?
I don't
So
think I've ever seen a security company IPO with that much revenue. Like typically, it's around like the magic number used to be 100 million ARR before you IPO, and then somebody started saying, well, in this new reality, it's more like 200, 250 that you want. So I mean that's a flex. We're going to wait for
mhm.
a billion ARR before IPO. That's a flex.
It is a flex. And now to the market cap number of Palo Alto, it's 130.15 billion. So
Wow,
yeah,
that's like
they're
double what it
valued
was
fairly
last
high.
year. I want to say, or even
Oh
earlier
yeah,
this year, maybe.
oh yeah. And if you remember at the beginning of this
Platformization.
year, yeah, if you remember when they announced their platformization approach at the beginning of this year, their stock price took like a $100 hit, 100 point hit per share, and it has now recovered, and it's $130 higher or 50% higher than the bottom of when they announced that in February of this year. So I would say that the platformization play is playing out in their favor. And 130 billion market cap is nothing to snuff at. I think maybe they're the first $1 trillion security business in 5, 10 years. Who knows what this looks like?
If
I'm
I
so
was a gambling
curious.
man, I would have bought that dip.
Oh
But I don't like to
yeah,
gamble.
yeah, or the CrowdStrike dip. If you look
Yeah,
at the
Yeah.
both look
after the
solid.
incident,
That was a
Yep.
solid dip to buy also. People talking about, oh, CrowdStrike is done now. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like,
No.
this is a blip. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And do you know how hard it is to move like from one platform to another? Right.
Yeah.
So,
Super sticky.
although
Yeah.
in the cloud space, I guess it's not too hard, but
Hmm.
I did talk to folks that were looking to move from, say, um, I don't want to be vendor specific, but like from one vendor to another vendor that has been here, but like from the cloud space, and it's especially if you're like going agentless and all that kind of stuff. So it's all APIs, right? So it's not as sticky
Yeah.
as say Palo Alto, but and I'm curious to see, have there been like what are the bad cybersecurity IPOs that have happened out there? So um, I'm trying to do some research here, and I don't see much.
There have
Um,
been some, so there were some, shoot, what is the acronym? Blank
SPACs.
check.
CYBR or
No,
checkpoint.
the blank check, going public via
Oh, specs.
SPAC.
SPACs. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Zero Fox was a SPAC. IronNet was a SPAC. So those were pretty ugly IPOs. I think Zero Fox is still hanging on there. They're somewhere in the single digits.
Mm.
But yeah, IronNet fell well below $1 and was delisted and bankruptcy, all that. But
Yeah.
yeah, we've seen some ugly IPOs, for sure.
Yeah.
Like FireEye didn't do all that great. They kind of fell apart, taken private, uh, broken up for parts. And Mandiant
That's true.
was always doing great. That was their best move ever, was to acquire Mandiant. And it took some of the assets, and then the rest went off and joined up with McAfee, I want to say, which is now um, Trellix. I think the assets
Mm.
went with Informed Trellix, the remaining assets of FireEye. So there have been some bad IPOs for sure. In fact, we've seen something like 13 security companies taken private over the last 5 years or something like that.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Barracuda
Proofpoint
went
and a
private.
few others.
Yeah, there's a ton of them.
Yeah. And to Iman's point, it's like we're in a very interesting space right now where we have to wonder, are we in a bubble with
Mhm.
Sierra raising
Another
300
one.
mil at it. Yeah, another bubble, right? Because ZERP back in during COVID era, money was essentially free, zero interest rates, and so now we kind of over the past year have seen much more M&A and funding activity. And so what comes next? We are seeing companies like Rapid7 and Qualys and Tenable uh, exploring potential acquisitions or being taken private. We've also seen a ton of consolidation in data security and CTEM exposure management space. Like everyone has bought an exposure management startup over the past year. Like NetSpy has picked one up, Tenable
Yeah.
has picked one up, Rapid7, same thing for DSPM solutions. So I think consolidation will continue. And then also we may potentially see some very big names be taken private by private equity firms like Thoma Bravo and others. So um, I think the security space is having some sort of organic cleansing, which will open up room for new innovation. So it's a fun time to be a founder and
Yeah.
also probably an investor, I would say.
I think these acquisitions are part of that, Darwin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a bunch of these companies coming out of all the layoffs and the
Yes.
interest raise and all that. They were not going to raise another round, so
Right.
this
That's right.
I think I shared one of them was a cyber six skills 115 million on 56 million raised. So not upside down on their money raised, but not probably not the exit that they were hoping for.
100%.
Yeah.
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 All
They're
right, let's
just
move on.
the
We get a bunch of other stuff to get to here.
let's
Any
do it.
last thoughts before we move on, Eamon?
No. Yeah, let's do it. Very
Okay.
exciting news. What do
So
we got?
Tanium, I included this one, and there's some reading between the lines. I'm sure we have to do here. It sounds very exciting. I hope it's not most of the excitement in the marketing, Uh, but more and more, I'm seeing the talk of doing autonomous management of security products, of endpoints. That was actually one of the Microsoft Ignite announcements, is some more autonomous management of identities using Copilot. So I thought this was, at least the language that they're using here sounds interesting. They're calling it Tanium Autonomous Endpoint Management. Um, yeah, what do you guys think of this one?
And they actually list Microsoft Copilot for security on that page, on their landing page.
Or do
So
they?
yeah. So here's the thing. So for a while, I've wanted autonomous remediation, but the security industry or security leaders have always been hesitant to do that. And I'm
Yeah,
like, why? Like, why not? So I
because
think now that
availability. Don't break anything at any cost. Just
yeah, and that's
take the right.
fair. I think that's fair. And there's still going to be a lot of, I mean, look at what happened with
That's right.
CrowdStrike, right, and Microsoft. So I think that's fair, but depending on the size of your organization and the resiliency and how you're set up, why not? Right? Like, why not take care of some low hanging fruit? Or if there's a critical 0 day or something, like, you know what? Let's push it except for like engineers or whatever it may be. So um, I think I'm curious to see how well it's adopted in the security industry.
Yeah,
Yeah, similar mindset here. Why not? And at some point, like I would say, autonomous and handing off certain areas of security to machines is inevitable. Um, Tanium may be one of the first of many to make this move, and with that, they'll take a lot of criticism, but also all the learnings that come with it.
yeah,
And 5 years from now, we'll be sitting here, saying like, "Oh, it's a
yeah.
no-brainer to do XYZ with autonomous agents," right?
And
So,
what
Exactly.
I'm seeing with all these announcements, I think is exactly what we need to be doing with AI. I see the same language: mundane tasks and repetitive tasks. These
mhm.
daily, mundane, and repetitive tasks, where every time you see this ticket come into the ticketing system, whether that be, Jira or ServiceNow or whatever, you're going to do the same action every time, right? Like I remember way back, this is maybe 10 years ago. I'm going to blank on the name of the NAC vendor, but it's a NAC vendor that built in orchestration very early before SOAR was a thing. And I remember talking to them, and they were like, "Yeah, one of our customers realized that they could use our platform to automatically turn network ports on and off in conference rooms because they had this requirement, this regulatory requirement that network ports had to be turned off in areas where they might have guests when not in use or when not authorized or something like that. So somebody would put in a ticket saying, "Hey, I'm having a meeting here. I need the network ports turned on in the room," and then they need to be turned off after the meeting ends. So they just automated that. When somebody put in the ticket, it, instead of a network engineer getting paid 160 grand a year or whatever they were getting paid 10 years ago, SSH into the switch and port up and then port down, 65 minutes later. Like that's ridiculous to have somebody doing, to pay them that much and have them do that kind of stupid stuff. That I think there's probably a lot of opportunities like that.
100%. Yeah,
All right.
if even with like vulnerability management and different security tool alerts and findings, there's a lot of different ways in which you could instruct an agent and an AI agent to handle and triage things for you. It doesn't just have to be the AI for SOC use case. There are many. I mean, like compliance is one of the most tedious
Yeah.
things to deal with, and
Tell me about
even
it.
if you could like help even with just 10 or 15% of the workload, and handling those mundane tasks for GRC folks, it's a massive value add. So I think the trend will continue, and the AI, at least the marketing folks and also like the product builders, they're taking the right approach and being very careful, understanding that security folks are pessimistic as it relates to new technology, and so kind of, you know land with a very simple use case and then slowly expand into the more complex stuff. So it's a good approach.
And you know what could happen actually is attackers can start exploiting this as well. So if they know that there's some sort of automatic remediation based on some whatever they could do, they could launch simplistic attacks just to simply denial of service folks. So with automated remediation, you do have the attackers that are
Mhm.
aware of this and could exploit it as well. So there is that side as well to
That's a good
consider.
point. Yep. All right. Yeah, so this next one is an interesting one. I was aware of these products before. Purism is a company that makes these very privacy focused products where they run a Linux, a derivative of Linux, a Linux distribution called PureOS. That very intentionally doesn't have any commercial stuff in it, and then their devices are kind of built from the ground up. I think some of their older devices used commercially available parts. They now have a phone that is built in the US entirely. And it's a very, it's a specialized phone, right? They're not going to sell these in the millions or even the hundreds of thousands. So it costs $2,000 a pop for a very outdated phone, 4 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs of storage, a 13 megapixel camera from maybe like the back in the Pixel 2 days. Um, but it's interesting, and they paired up with I think Umax is like a wireless provider here, and you're talking $100 a month for it. It's a lot to pay for, you know, something that only solves part of the problem for privacy, but noteworthy all the same. I do like the fact that they have hardware switches for disabling cameras and microphones and radios. So like the laptop I'm using right now, my framework laptop has a hardware switch that disconnects at the hardware level my microphones and camera. And visibly you can tell, like it shows red when they're turned off, so it's very obvious when they're switched off as opposed to turned on. So I think that should be a more mainstream thing, but in general, I think this is more of a very niche product that's interesting to look at. But uh, I can't imagine, like maybe at RSA or DEF CON or something, I'd run into somebody who actually bought one. But yeah, let us know if
Yeah,
you know somebody who bought one or if you bought one, and tell us what the experience is like.
yeah, I'd be really curious. I mean, it even has a user replaceable modem, which is kind of cool. Um,
Yeah.
but this has been done before, right? Black Phone was one,
Mhm.
and there's been a couple others.
I think most of those were
Um,
Android derived though, and this one is not based on Android at all. I think it's a Linux distro, kind of like Ubuntu tried to
okay.
do like a mobile, and Firefox tried to both do mobile phone operating systems that were Linux based, not Android. Well, Android is Linux, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So that's good. That's a good thing. I think. I mean, it's pretty scary the type of where your data is sitting out there right now with all the data brokers that are selling so much information.
yeah.
So,
A lot of it's at the app level though, so just shipping an OS, that's like this only solves part of the problem. And then if
mm,
if I don't have a good maps feature, like we're pretty demanding of phones these days. It needs to take
absolutely,
amazing photos. It needs to have really good GPS that gives me directions to all the places I'm going. It
yeah,
needs to have a Signal app. It needs to have a WhatsApp app. It needs to have, I've got to be able to communicate with people, right? It's a communicator. And anytime you build a new platform, you're going to be missing a whole bunch of that stuff.
yeah, yeah, and even connecting to your service provider, um, over 5G, 4G, they're still getting a lot of like location data and a lot of metadata from your traffic, so DNS and whatnot. So it's harder and harder to protect your privacy these days, but this is a good step in that direction.
Yeah. All right. So not surprising at all, but Jen Easterly and the rest of the political appointees to CISA have announced that they're going to resign on Inauguration Day. And I think this is pretty standard. It's not anything that's controversial or surprising, given that they were appointed by a Democratic um, uh, White House, and we've got the opposite coming in. So, but it is noteworthy in that this will effectively create a new era for CISA. So, I think CISA is going into kind of an unknown here. Could be good, could be bad, who knows? But it's something we'll want to pay attention to.
Jen Isley is my hero. So now that she's gonna have some extra time, Jen, I'd love to meet you in person one day. But yeah, she's done some amazing work, and we're all gonna be watching what's gonna happen next. CISA is such a critical organization. So
And she will effectively avoid being fired by tweet. We don't want two CISA directors in a row fired by tweet. So
yeah, I mean it's interesting. Do you decide to quit proactively, or do you or wait until you get fired, right? So it's a tough decision. It's a tough thing.
yeah,
So
I
it'll be
think it's
fun.
good to go out on your own terms.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to be clear, there is leadership at CISA that are not political appointees. They're like normal government employees that were hired in through the typical route. So those folks, as far as I know, aren't going anywhere. So it's not like CISA is going to suddenly become headless.
For now, unless what is it, category F, section F gets enacted, and then tens or hundred thousands of employees could get affected. I don't know. Not to get into the weeds. I don't know if the employees do count, but
Lot of unknowns coming in with yeah, lot of maybes that are out there that would really shake things up. But yeah, we'll just have to wait and see.
I think I should just get a big thing of popcorn here instead of coffee. Because there's a
Popcorn
lot of things
machine.
now I'm just
Yeah,
going to be watching. Yeah.
that'd be great. You could just reach behind. We start to cover a story and just fill a bag with with
That's,
popcorn.
yep.
It'd be great.
Just going to watch. That's going to be my comment.
Any any ideas or guesses who will be the next CISA director? Who would you like
Okay,
to see
like
there?
I, who do I think is
I would,
likely? Or
yeah. No, no. Who would you like to see there?
well,
I nominate Adrian. I nominate Adrian.
I nominate Adrian too. No, I think Kevin Mandia, founder of Mandia, would be a
Ooh.
great pick. He has a lot of experience with the public sector. Um, that's the
but I
only
have to leave
person
his
that comes top
role.
of mind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great minds out there, but it's also a political position. So I don't know. That's something I would have to think on for a while. I wouldn't want the role. I don't need that level of scrutiny. Like what was it Jen Easterly did? She retweeted something or commented on something and it blew up. Like I don't need that level of scrutiny. Like it was something not even related to tech or security, I don't think.
Misinformation, I believe.
Maybe. Yeah. Well, I mean that's what our the last CISA director got let go for was trying to debunk misinformation. All right. Moving on to some less political stuff. We've got some interesting threats here. One of them is pretty funny. Some Jupyter notebook servers that are just out there and or instances that are out there and just open to the general public are being used to restream commercial live sports events. So that was pretty funny. And then the other one here, which is not so much haha funny, but funny in kind of a depressing way, is that one of the top 10 ransomware or malware strains is now exploiting very old versions of Microsoft Excel, like 8+ year old versions of Microsoft Excel, and it's working for them, which is depressing.
That is, yeah. The gift that keeps on going, giving, right? Excel vulnerabilities and VBA
Yeah,
scripts and whatnot.
but
Lovely.
it's not Microsoft Office anymore. It is Microsoft 365 apps.
Apps.
Let's
Yeah.
make sure we use the correct term. Is
Yeah.
it Excel Copilot? Did the name of Excel change? I don't know.
Yeah.
All right.
SMH. That's all I have to say.
Um, yeah, this essay here is an interesting one. The vendor's role in combating alert fatigue. I do think vendors have a lot of responsibility here, but it's a hard problem because the customers tend to ask for things that hurt them. Like they want all the information, they want all the data, and then they see what that looks like, and it's just completely overwhelming, right? Like you don't want to miss anything, but at the same time, you don't want to miss everything because you asked to see everything, right? Like it can blind you. And I call it the cost of customization. That part of the product that you can't build for the customer because you don't know what environment you're going to be putting your product into. You don't know what environment they're going to be standing up your product in. So it's got to be customized to suit their environment when you do that. So I think it's a tough problem.
Yeah, alert fatigue is one of those things, like less known things outside the cybersecurity industry, and so, I mean, I talk about it in my book as well. Like, I have a whole thing on alert fatigue. I mean, look at Target, right? And Target was kind of that attack was not seen because they were getting alerts, but they got so many alerts. So
Yeah.
focus on. I mean, just again, keep it simple, right? And when you're doing an operation center, only focus on high or criticals. And in fact, just come up with a baselining um, plan to go in there and see what's right. Um, I don't know. Vendor. I think give we give folks a lot of options, and they'll burn themselves with that as well. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this article is great because it shines a light on the, like, we always hear about the pain and suffering of SOC teams and of security teams because of alert fatigue and false positives, but we very rarely see it from the vendor's angle and their responsibility. And when we think about like a shared responsibility model for the overall ROI that a customer is getting from a security solution, a huge part of that is being able to um, make the alerts consumable and digestible and actionable. And part of that is the volume of alerts. And I do believe that the onus is on vendors to make that experience, um, a pleasant one. And so we're seeing more, like, there's so much marketing copy that alludes to and actually verbatim uses alert fatigue. But now we're seeing products that are helping reduce alert fatigue, like the AI
Mhm.
for socks, which is
Yep.
is one place where it's helping out a ton. But
Is
it,
it?
it even goes down to like the onboarding experience, right? Like, do you want to, there's so many areas where vendors can introduce efficiencies to reduce alert fatigue. And I think it's time for vendors to start taking that upon themselves. So it's a great article for if you're a product builder, definitely worth checking out.
I mean,
Yeah.
Darwin, in your role, right?
Mhm.
You face this all the time, right? As a product manager. So, like, do you ever get like feature requests? Oh, I want an alert for this, and you're like, I don't think that's a good
Do
idea,
we?
right? Like, do you get that in your world?
I think it's more so, since I'm in the security data ETL space and we're filtering it out noisy data. It's more so, can you provide recommendations out of the box for a certain data source on what is noisy data? And so I would say it's the inverse of that. It's more so, how can you help me as a practitioner do my job better, and focus on the data that matters most? And common feature requests is out of the box recommendations for filtering out the noise. So yes, to an extent.
Right. We are running down on time here, so I want to run through a couple of these here real quick. So we've got some great reports here. Not going to go too deep into any of these. Thinkst puts out a quarterly Thinkstscape is what they call it, and it's a PDF where they look at somewhere around 1,500 blog posts and all the conferences that have occurred in that portion. So for this particular edition, we've got stuff from Black Hat, stuff from DEF CON. They go through all that stuff and they try and find the most interesting stuff, at least to them, to the folks who put this together. They do a great job with it. They do kind of these one-page summaries, like here's what's going on here, here's why it's interesting, and there's a lot of fun stuff in here. One of them is a talk that one of the Let's Encrypt engineers gave on what if they needed to revoke and replace all 400 million active Let's Encrypt certificates all at once? How long would it take? So there's some really interesting, thought-provoking stuff in there, but also some fun stuff as well. So recommend you check out that. There is an interesting report from Tynes here where they've done a survey of some 50 plus CISOs on using AI in security. And then there's another interesting one here where Consumer Reports actually tests a bunch of these services that claim to remove you from these people search services. Like probably everybody watching this video on YouTube has seen some kind of advertisement for Delete Me, for example. Or yeah, I think listening to 404 Media, Delete Me is one of their sponsors also, and they talk about using Delete Me. So it actually gives you the results on how good of a job these services did, and some of them are not great. So it's worth a look at that report. Some of them do okay, and some of them are not great. But it definitely calls out with data exactly which ones are good or not good. And then if there's no comments there, that brings us to our squirrel stories. Any comments on any of those? I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at any of these reports.
No, I got a lot of reading to do now, so I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, let's go on to the squirrel stories. You guys might have seen this one, this British project. They created this fake persona named Daisy, which is a AI, and they have video of it, but I think they just use it as a voice AI. I think the video is mostly just to show off the project. But basically, if somebody attempts to scam you from a phone number in the UK, you can send it to them, and they will detect if any numbers come in from that scammer. And they have this AI who will just waste all the scammer's time. Like they will stay on the phone with the scammer for hours, and it's depicting like an old lady, and she'll pretend she doesn't understand, or like she'll start talking about something unrelated to why the scammer called her, and and it's pretty entertaining. There's a video where they I think they play back some actual stuff from her wasting scammers time, and they have some stats on how much of the scammers time they actually wasted with this AI. So it's a pretty cool use case of deepfakes, right? Of this AI technology that could be used by bad folks, but this is a good example of how it could be used for good.
Yep. Yeah, I love this. AI granny is what some folks are calling her. And it's, you know, you have people who dedicate a portion of their week or their day to go after some of these scammers because they feel personally tied to it for whatever reason. Maybe their grandmother or one of their elders were impacted by these scammers, and now they have a
Yeah.
vendetta to go after the scammers. This is a great way to go after the scammers without using your time or energy or resources. And so O2 is like the telecom company who
Yeah.
created this. I wonder how they're selling it. But I would love to, you know, for all the scam likely calls that I get, deploy AI Granny on them. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, as
Yeah.
far as I understand it, it's just like a marketing stunt from them, to just do some good, but also to promote AI as a potential force for good.
Yeah, it's basically they're automating the stuff that Scammer Payback and Scam Sandwich have been doing,
Yeah,
which is pretty cool. I've definitely enjoyed those videos, especially where they have the CCTV recording and while calling back and recording. So yeah, more great. Let's do it, man. Let's we need this. We need more of this.
and then I recently added a second story because I mentioned I'm here at the supercomputing conference in Atlanta, and one of the vendor's name is Vidura. Is that how you say that? Vidura?
Sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah. My partner's not listening, but she's the one in the HPC supercomputer world. So that's the reason I'm here. Also, security is very interesting. It's a very different conversation when you're talking about HPC stuff and supercomputer stuff. But basically, they brought in the uh, Bjornsson. I don't know how to say his first name, and I'm not going to attempt it and butcher it. But he is the actor that played the Mountain in real life strongman. He's won a couple strongman competitions, and he lifted over 282 petabytes of data, which they said is a record. Probably because nobody ever tried to lift data before. So basically, there's a bunch of solid state drives in two different buckets, and they connected it with an Olympic, uh, you know, uh, 45-pound typical Olympic barbell, and the thing bends. It's almost 1,000 pounds of weight that he's
Wow.
deadlifting. So he's lifting some real weight. But I would argue he didn't lift any data at all because if you look closely at the video, which I have linked here, these are solid state drives that are still in their packaging. So they don't actually contain any data. They contain the capacity for 260, what was it? 282 petabytes of data. But if they're still in their packaging, they're not holding any data.
I agree. I
So
agree.
I think he
They had
lifted
some data
nothing.
on there. Yeah. Yeah, we need to have some 4K, 8K videos on there. Really dense. That takes up small clusters, right? To use up every nano inch of space on there. Um, so there's no space in between bytes and nodes.
And so that brings up the question. There is a question. Is it true that storing data in USB memory makes the weight lighter? So it's a very small amount, but by adding electrons to a solid state drive, it does change the weight,
Yeah, at that level, 282. I wonder how many chips were in there.
right? How many individual chips?
Correct. Yeah. How many individual silicon chips were in there? What was this? What was the smallest? What was the smallest chip size? Right? Are these like 4 terabyte SSDs? What's the smallest? And then what's the cluster
Yeah.
size of space? Yeah. I mean, just we could go down a rabbit hole here.
Yeah. The answer to the question isn't clear here from this article I'm looking at, but I think whether there's data or not data on a drive does infinitesimally change the actual weight of it because of the amount
Well,
of
I'm going to ask
electrons
ChatGPT
stored
right
on.
now about it. So yeah.
Yeah, you could do that. Right. If you can bring it up in the next 5 seconds.
Yeah. Take 284 petabytes of data. Is there a difference? Let's see. Is there a difference in weight? Can I type fast enough? In weight? Ah,
Okay, while Eamon is typing that, I want to thank Eamon and Darwin so much for joining me today. I'm going to go ahead and read out. Maybe he'll have the answer by the time I get to the end of it. A big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. Next week we are off for Thanksgiving, and we'll have a Vault episode for you. We'll be back to our normal schedule on December 5th. Is there an answer, Eamon?
There is. Calculating the mass difference, and it has this whole equation here. The mass is approximately 2 picograms, which is trillions of times smaller than the weight of the storage device itself. So it does change by 2 picograms.
2 picograms.
I'll
That's
send you
amazing.
the link to this, and
We'll figure out like how many slices of a grain of rice 2 picograms is for the next episode.
yeah, basically.
Yeah, I'm sure it's like a percentage of a grain of rice, right?
Yeah, like an atom's worth, I guess. So,
Yeah.
but we
Awesome.
did solve the question. So.
Thank you, Eamon, for that. Thank you, Darwin, for joining us as well and bringing us some other great stories here. Thanks everyone listening. We'll see you next time.